So I want to start off talking about seed. So take a minute to kind of think about in your head, when I say seed, what do you think of immediately? And most of you probably imagining some sort of maybe bird seed or seed that you put on your cereal or things that you put in the ground, they'll turn into a plant, which is definitely correct. But there's a whole other sector of farming that uses seed as well. And it may not be one that any of you thought of. Farmers in agriculture use seed like this, but their seed is live animals. These seeds are baby oysters that are only about 2 millimeters in length. And oysters aren't typically thought of as being pretty cute animals, but I think that when they're this size, they're pretty cute, if you know what you're looking at. So this is around the preferred size of seed that oyster farmers buy to take to their farms and then subsequently put out into the water. Oyster farming is an important industry in BC, with 60% of the oysters produced in Canada coming directly from BC. So the cool, nutrient-rich waters of British Columbia's vast coastline provide the ideal location to grow some of the highest quality shellfish found on menus all around the world. And I personally have seen shellfish from BC in a Vegas restaurant. People have said that they've seen it in New York, so it is well known, this very kind of close region that we live in, for the high quality shellfish that is produced. And as this map shows, shellfish farms are located primarily, there we go. Oh, you can't really see it very well, that's okay. So this is sort of Big Red, and it's spotted all around. This is Bay and Sound. Oh, here we go. Bay and Sound. You can see how densely populated that is. And Bay and Sound is about half an hour north of here. It spans from Deep Bay to Courtenay, and it's kind of a region in between Vancouver Island and Denman Island. And that is where the cool, nutrient-rich water is abundant. And historically, the most prolific areas for shellfish growing have been in and around this area. Shellfish are the oldest sector of the aquaculture industry on the west coast of North America. It's actually a different type of oyster than you've probably eaten or are used to, but the Olympia oyster was what was farmed back then, and that is our native oyster. And due to its high popularity, and there was a whole bunch of similar advertisements in newspapers dating back to the 1867 time, those oysters are now actually species at risk because of over-harvesting. So back then it was actually a main food source for people, and then it did lead to that demise. So around 1912 is when the introduction of the Pacific oyster came from Japan, and that's when the traditional oyster farming has boomed from there. So oyster farming is by definition green and sustainable, as shellfish are filter feeders that get their required nutrients by drawing seawater through their gills. They rely on natural food that exists already in the environment. Shellfish industry has a direct interest in a clean environment. Poor water conditions lead to poor stock. So the shellfish industry has a direct interest in keeping that ocean free of pollution, and that helps a lot through education. Alternatively, the farming of oysters and other shellfish is relatively benign and even ecologically restorative, and holds promise for relieving pressure on land-based protein sources. Shellfish farms also have a much lower environmental impact compared to land-based livestock, since shellfish do not produce greenhouse gases like some livestock do in large quantities. You can also farm in quite high densities without having the same issues that you would have with land-based agriculture. So while the shellfish industry, people are worried that the high concentrations of shellfish farms may have a negative effect on other marine organisms in the ecosystem. However, research to date has shown that there is little or no negative effect of shellfish farming. However, this does not mean that it is a perfect industry by any means. To farm shellfish, it does require a substantial amount of equipment. Most of that is plastic-based. You can see in the top left corner that these are anti-predator nets that are put up to stop things like sea stars from coming onto stock. This is actually a research that's ongoing, part of Deep Bay, but it does show an example of plastic used nets along the shores. To the top right, you can see these white plastic cylinders. That's for planting out gooey ducks. And again, it's an anti-predator sort of thing, but you can imagine if any large storm comes by and uproots one of those, it's now litter, which is an issue. And on the bottom, it shows the best amount of trays that are put out on floats in the ocean. Those go down. And just recently, about a month or two ago, there was a large storm in the Sound, which caused quite a few of these rafts to lose their trays, which then washed up on shore. So it is a problem, and the industry leaders are trying very hard to encourage farmers to monitor any loss and continually check their shores for garbage. While the shellfish industry has potential for growth, it has recently seen a decline. Several farms shut down permanently due to being unable to purchase enough seed to bring stock to harvest. The shellfish industry across the province has been unable to find enough seeds for farmers for over the past 5 years. This is due to a few reasons. Some hatcheries cite ocean acidification problems at hatcheries in Washington state primarily are causing a decline in the viable seed. High startup costs make it difficult for local businesses to start their own hatcheries. So to address this issue, a third of all of the oyster seed is now coming from Chile. Relying on foreign seed is not ideal. It's a far distance for these sensitive animals to travel, as well as it could also increase the potential to import new diseases to the region. Another issue is Pacific oyster mortality syndrome. It's also known as oyster herpes. And I'm not going to get you the same sort of name recognition with that as I did with the seed, but it is a big issue right now, and the massive die-off are being reported in several oyster farms across France, Ireland, Australia, and New Zealand, and they're seeing losses of up to 100% of their stock dying from the virus. And they're contributing the factors of the increase of this disease could be from global warming and the subsequent effect of the significant rise in the ocean's temperature. So at Vancouver Island University's Deep Bay Marine Field Station, there we go. It is located in Main Sound. Has anybody been there before? Do you? Oh, awesome. So they are working at addressing these issues through applied research. Most recent project and funding include increasing the amount of oyster seed in the market, and this is not only good for the local economy, but also for the food sector. Vancouver Island University recently received $50,000 to expand its oyster seed production at the Deep Bay Marine Field Station. This infrastructure will be used to support a selective breeding program to target the development of broodstock. And by broodstock, I mean like the adult oysters, and you can kind of see them hanging out in the broodstock tank up there. And that's what we hold on to and use for spawning. So that's our adult oysters. And we're hoping that targeting the development of the broodstock with improved resistance will see improved resistance to disease and environmental changes. The Bay Marine Field Station will also supply farmers with the seed that is now better adapted to our local growing conditions rather than down in Chile. The Deep Bay Marine Field Station is also working with the BC Shellfish Growers Association and the Hakai Institute, who together received $75,000 for new equipment for ocean monitoring to develop baseline data to better understand the local impacts of climate change. And that will be streamed online so people can do citizen science type observations, can be picked up by classrooms to monitor that, and any person that's curious about what's going on in real time in, well, Bay Sound, but there's also other places around the region. So money is also used at increasing algae production. This is our algae lab, and the kids love it when we come on tours because it looks like a mad science lab, which It kind of does. So the money will be used to increase algae production, as the more oyster seed we produce requires more food. Those little tiny guys, although they're small, they eat a ton, especially because we're producing upwards of 1 million of them once in time. So we have to double the size of our algae lab that we have now. Further industry relevant research can be applied to the algae lab, such as comparing growth rates using different types of lights. So you can see at the back, these pretty purple lights are LED lights, and then on the left-hand side is just a white fluorescent light, seeing what sort of densities grow fastest and produce the best algae. Further research can be done with algae and increasing energy efficiency in aquaculture. So on the left there is what's called a bright box. And it's also called a, bioreactor, algae bioreactor, which I think is the coolest name you can call something that looks like that. So it's basically a white box lined all 6 sides with lights and algae floating on the inside. And it's very efficient at doing all the jobs necessary for growing algae. It doses in the CO2 and the nutrients and everything. It's a pretty low maintenance piece of equipment, so less manpower is required, which is pretty much the main overhead of shellfish growing. In addition, there's also being work done looking at solar panels to acquire energy out on floats to power the flopsies, which are used for tumbling oyster seed out when they're out in the ocean. In addition to supplying applied research, the Deep Bay Marine Field Station is a unique building which showcases environmental design. It was the first university building to receive Platinum LEED designation in Canada. Several things that went into receiving this designation are, it has a very unique heating and cooling system which brings water up from the ocean. All the water goes through the tanks in the labs, and then before it goes back out, goes through a heat exchanger which collects any latent heat in the water and then mixes that with food-grade glycol, pumps it underneath the floors as radiant heating. Also, the wood that goes along the viewing mezzanines of the labs and the stairs is all pine beetle recovered wood. And we collect rainwater off of the roof into our remote heater that goes down to a holding tank, which is used for gray water and flushing toilets and irrigation. So this promotes and showcases practical applications of alternative technologies for energy and water usage, and will serve as a model of how various coastal and marine activities can exist harmoniously. So the main threat to oyster and aquaculture industry in general as a whole is climate change. Increased acidity is making seed harder to produce, and warmer waters are spreading deadly shellfish diseases to new regions. Education is the key to slowing the effects of climate change before it is too late. At the Deep Bay Marine Field Station, we provide year-round educational opportunities for K-12 students and beyond. We have guided tours of the station as we talk about what we're doing, and we also have interactive displays for all ages to talk about threats from everything from what I've talked about to microplastics, increased garbage and waste to mitigate those effects. So the future of the shellfish industry is looking up with these advances as facilities like the Deep Bay Marine Field Station work at innovative new techniques for the industry while educating visitors to the station on key issues and meaningful ways that visitors can help. And that's what I have for you today. Thank you.